Good morning. It's December 27th, and today it's the NBA DFS strategy show to talk about a massive 10-game Tuesday slate, as a lot of these teams didn't play on Christmas Day, and they're making up for it today. Adam, how are you doing on this Tuesday?
Doing pretty well. Nice that, wish we had a couple less games, but at least, we got the 7 games yesterday, 10 today. I can live with that. So looking forward to it. Yesterday kind of sucked, so ready to get back at it.
Yeah, yesterday was obviously bunch of New Orleans being shorthanded was obviously the building blocks to the slate. It felt like you nailed them, and then if you nail the leverage with off of Lillard with Nurkic and Grant, I think you find yourself to the top. But it was difficult to get there in terms of just like how my process went there. I don't usually get too much of Jeremy Grant if Lillard's in, and he ended up being decently owned on FanDuel, and I think he had some decent amount of ownership on DraftKings as well, it felt like. But here we are talking about 20 teams on this massive 10-game slate. Hit that like button for us, click that subscribe button, and shout out to our presenting sponsor, Prize Picks, and they have definitely changed the player prop game on a daily basis there. You can play name a sport, you probably find it there in their lobby. And we also have an exciting tool that you can take advantage of, and an exciting offer where you can get free Stokastic plus Platinum. So don't miss out on that offer as we get started on this 10-game slate. First game, we got Philly taking on Washington. Philly did play on Christmas Day. Philly is 4.5-point favorites with a 224 total. And on the Philly side, it's we have been on a bunch of Philly slates together, and it feels like the same story, different day. Joel Embiid and James Harden. It's been a lot more Harden than Embiid for me of late, and it's kind of worked out with a huge slate on this Tuesday. Joel Embiid is kind of getting brushed off to the side, but I'm tempted to go back to Harden again. I think what Harden's been pulling off of late, it's kind of for real. He started slow after the trade last season, and I knew he would perform better. It was really, I think, a tough adjustment for him last season. Now with the whole training camp, more playing time with Embiid, and Harden's really playing well in terms of fantasy perspective. More importantly, he's paying off that price tag pretty easily, night in and night out. It feels like more often than last. And here we are. I think going to a guy like Harden at $9,700 makes a lot of sense in my opinion. And how about Embiid? Do you think Harden over Embiid as well, like I do today?
Yeah, I think it's just mostly because it's easier to get there. Embiid certainly projects a bit better, and his price tag has come down a little bit. It's a perfectly fine matchup against Washington, but you just have that point guard and shooting guard eligibility on Harden for $1,200 less, and Embiid obviously just center only. With there being 10 games, there's going to be a ton of opportunity costs to the position. So that upside, that ceiling is still there for Embiid, but I think it's just going to be easier to get to Harden, who's playing huge minutes in competitive games. We saw him play 43 minutes last game, didn't leave the floor the entire second half. You can pretty comfortably project him for around 38, knowing that if the game does stay close, he's playing more than that. So, yeah, I think he's just going to be the easier one to get to.
Yeah, and I think Harden looks pretty solid, even on FanDuel, even better at $9,600. A Yahoo price tag of 43. Harden by far my favorite Sixer to go to. And then it's a bunch of secondary guys and guys like Harrison, Melton, and then the tertiary guys, Milton, Niang, and Tucker. It's a 10-game slate. Do you have interest in going to Tobias Harris in a Washington matchup? For him to get that ceiling, it's feels a little very random at times if he's going to pull that off, sharing the court with Harden and Embiid. But now he's at 6,600. Is it worth taking some chances on him?
I don't typically get there much, and I doubt that I will today with it being a 10 gamer. I view him and Melton both as guys that sort of can be a last piece in individual lineups. If Melton avoids foul trouble, you're likely to get 32 to 34 minutes. Harris, you're likely to get 35, 36 minutes, maybe one or two more. But the playing time will be there. It's just that when Harden and Embiid are active, Harris is such a low usage guy, around like a 17 to 18% usage rate. Playing so many minutes, like he can still run into some big games, but I think he's priced about where he should be, if not a little bit overpriced for Harden and Embiid to be in. So it's not somebody I'm actively targeting, but it is a decent matchup against Washington. He is likely to play a bunch of minutes. If he's the last piece into a lineup here or there, that's fine, but I wouldn't expect to get a lot.
And any interest in the tertiary guys, your Niang, your Shake Milton, PJ Tucker?
No.
All right. Onto the Washington side we go. And on the Washington side, we were dealing with injuries earlier in the week last time out, but a team that I expect to be fully healthy tonight, with the guys of Kuzma and Gafford being back, but Porzingis, I believe, is still out. With Kuzma coming in at 8,500 and
Porzingis
7,800.
isn't on the injury report.
Porzingis isn't. He should be healthy, right?
Yeah. Porzingis is
Okay.
in, obvious questionable.
Okay. I believe our okay. Right now, I expect to update to our projections by the time this gets updated with Porzingis' news. But this just got updated. So Porzingis is in, and Porzingis comes in at 8,800, Kuzma 85, and Beal at 7,800. And the way this pricing sticks out, I'm just going to take my chances with Bradley Beal. He's the cheapest of the bunch on DraftKings, while on FanDuel, it's maybe Kuzma at 8K. But with all of their big three healthy, it's just tournament flyers for me. I don't have any significant interest getting to one or the over the other. The way their price is ironed out, just because I feel like outside of Beal, Kuzma and Porzingis are priced like Beal is out. So it's tough for me to go there in any sort of fashion on DraftKings. But how do you feel about the Wizards' big three?
Yeah, I mean, whenever all three of them are healthy, it's difficult to prioritize them. Porzingis is down to 8,800 on DraftKings. You're likely to get 34, 35 minutes from him, which is nice. But still, at center only, difficult to prioritize him. FanDuel, I believe he has power forward eligibility, so it makes it a little bit easier. Played 34 and a half minutes in their last game against Sacramento. So, the playing time certainly should be there, but still where he's center only, it's tough. 8,500 for Kuzma and 7,800 for Beal. Both look fine. Beal, not the same high usage guy that he has been in the past, and does only have shooting guard eligibility on DraftKings, but still a 25 to 26% usage rate when everybody's healthy. Should play 35 or 36 minutes. Also is involved as a playmaker. So there's a ceiling for him, but I don't think he really stands out just because his role this year has changed.
Yeah, agreed here. And also, I believe Will Barton is out for this Washington team. Does that change your interest in any of the bench players, that being a D-line, right? Monty Morris.
Barton's also in.
Barton's also in. All right. This is throwing me off right now. But with Barton also returning to this team, do you have any interest in the bench players, plus Monty Morris for this Wizards team?
No, I mean, with it being a 10-game slate, I'm not really interested in getting to the other random pieces. One thing that is worth noting is that Rui Hachimura played 27 minutes last game. Now, that was a game where you were missing Denny Avdia. So Avdia questionable today. They went with the big starting lineup where Gafford started alongside Porzingis, which was odd. Gafford still only ended up playing 20 minutes, but that game you had no Barton and you had no Avdia. So I don't expect 27 minutes from Rui, but it is notable that he physically played 27 minutes. He's very, very quickly ramped up his playing time after missing a bunch of time due to injury. So at 4K, like if Avdia were to miss this game, you could conceivably get 26 minutes or so from Rui. Probably still wouldn't be enough to make him any sort of a priority on a 10-game slate, but he is somebody that you can keep an eye on if Avdia is out in particular, just because he clearly isn't on much of a minutes restriction here.
Yeah, I know that's worth taking some chances on Hachimura right now, the way things stand. Obviously, I expect news to completely break throughout the day and potentially change that up. But onto the Lakers and Orlando game we go. Click that like button first. Orlando's favored by 3.5 with a total of 235.5. And obviously, on the Lakers side of things, we look at LeBron James with no Anthony Davis. And he seems like it's an option to definitely take a chance on tournaments. I have no issues going to LeBron James yet again, but there's still usage to be spread around. In the backcourt, there's Schroeder and Pat Bev who've been getting a ton of minutes. Russ is not playing as many minutes. I don't think, has cracked 30 minutes in a while, it feels like. Thomas Bryant had a weird rotation on Christmas Day where I don't think he played much in the second half. Maybe the first rotation stint, and then they went small because believe the Mavs put up a 51 piece in the third quarter alone, and that kind of changed up the rotation, I feel like, for Darvin Ham and the Lakers. And he verbally said, I'm just trying to find something that's going to stick on the wall. He really is struggling to find a consistent rotation, the way it seems like here. So there's a lot of volatility, but I feel confident, obviously, in LeBron's minutes, Schroeder's minutes, Lonnie Walker, and Reeves and Beverly. But everyone else, it's kind of up in the air. The guys like Troy Brown Jr., Wenyen Gabriel. In the front court, I'm not sure what to do with the Thomas Bryant thing just because of what happened last game. Was that just a one-off thing? Or do you think we can safely project him for 28, 29, 30 minutes again?
I mean, I lean that way. I don't really know what to make of it. I know the first half was foul trouble. He picked up his second and third foul in the second quarter, so he lost about 5.5 minutes there. But then just never sub back in. Excuse me. Thought I was going to sneeze. Apparently, I'm not. They went with the smaller lineups where you had LeBron James getting minutes at the 5. We hadn't seen them really doing that previously when Davis was out, but it is certainly something they can do. Against Orlando, you do have a bigger front court. You have Wagner, Bamba, Carter, some combination of those guys playing center minutes. So I expect that you're getting upper 20s in minutes from Thomas Bryant. Certainly, you don't have to. We just saw it not happen. But at 5,900. I think he's still a reasonable option, but there is more reason to be concerned about those minutes today than there were on Christmas days now that we've seen them actually go to those LeBron lineups.
Yeah, reference to Hannah Banana in the chat. Bryant did get hurt in the Charlotte game. I know the broadcast mentioned the injury that happened in the Charlotte game. I don't know if there was a re-aggravation or he re-injured that shoulder in that game.
I'm not sure either. Greg said he thought that's what happened. But okay. I don't know. I haven't seen that confirmed anywhere.
Because we never got like an official report from the team reporter.
And he's not on the injury report at all today.
So as much as I'd like to assume he got re-injured and tell myself, okay, that happens, I don't know exactly here. But to wrap up the rest of this team, any interest in taking some chances on Dennis Schroeder at that price tag, 5,100, and Beverly playing a lot of minutes at 4,100 at times? I just like LeBron James, and I'm really not that interested in getting anyone above the field here. Maybe Schroeder, but that's really about it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's LeBron's the one I think you can feel confident in. I'm still fine taking some shots on Westbrook at 7,200, just hoping he plays well and runs into some more minutes. Same goes with Thomas Bryant. As far as Schroeder goes or Beverly, probably don't really need them on a slate of this size.
Yeah, and that's really about it. It's LeBron by a distant margin for this Lakers team, but that's really about it. Onto the Orlando side we go, and this Orlando team was one of the hottest teams heading into Christmas, the Christmas break they had. We have Markelle Fultz here, $5,900. Been playing a lot of minutes coming off an injury here. Then Cole Anthony is his backup, comes in at 5K. He's getting more ownership last I checked than Markelle Fultz, but the guys who lead the usage here, it's Banchero. Franz Wagner's also in the picture. Wendell Carter did return last game. He did come off the bench. I don't know how much longer that continues with Carter Jr. coming off the bench. I think he will surpass Mo Wagner. He should. But talk to me about this Orlando team and taking on a very exciting Lakers matchup for them. I certainly think one or two of these guys can outperform their salary and become a solid piece to our lineups tonight. Is there a preference that you lean on one way or the other in terms of this Orlando team?
Yeah, so I mean, it is a favorable matchup. They are getting healthier, and that's a problem. It remains to be seen what the starting lineup is going to be tonight. Last game they stuck with that same starting lineup. They brought Wendell Carter Jr. off the bench. He played 19 minutes. He did get garbage time run. That's something that I always try and pay attention to when you get a player coming back from injury, because to me it suggests that they're trying to ramp them up relatively quickly. That they were just like, all right, cool. Here's a chance to throw him out there for some extra minutes, though that we definitely don't need to have him out there, but we can get him to 19 minutes here. Makes me think there's a good chance he's getting up to like 24 minutes or so in this game. So my guess is that you see him and Bol both play around 24 minutes, and then you get the split between Mo Wagner and Mo Bamba that we've been seeing, where Wagner plays around 28, Bamba plays around 20. So I think that's going to be what we see, but there's a lot of volatility there as this team gets healthier. As far as the Cole Anthony versus Markelle Fultz piece, I'm still interested in Fultz at 5,900. He should play around 30 minutes, 28 to 30 minutes if this game's competitive. Cole Anthony at 5K is always going to have tournament upside, though. We saw that last game where Fultz got banged up a little bit. Anthony ended up playing 30 and a half minutes in that game. More often than not, you're getting games where Cole Anthony plays like 20 to 22 minutes. And if that happens at 5K, you don't want him. But he does still have that path to getting your 27 to 30 minute game at typically low ownership at 5K. So the tournament upside is there. It's just a relatively low probability spot, so I wouldn't go too crazy on it.
Yeah, I think definitely keep an eye on the front court situation, what the minutes look like as they break down for Wagner and Wendell Carter specifically. And I do think slowly Bull's minutes are dropping week by week. It feels like with the Boncaro being healthy here. But it's a great Lakers matchup. I certainly think it's worth taking some chances on tournaments for sure. Any final thoughts on this Orlando team before we move on to the next one?
No, I mean, Bancaro and Franz Wagner, I think, are both certainly playable, but there's just nothing really interesting to say about them. Like, Wagner should play around 32, Bancaro should play around 34. They're both priced pretty much correctly, but it is a good matchup.
Awesome. On to the next game we go. The Clippers are traveling to Toronto. The Clippers are on a back into the back-to-back as they came back. I believe they were down 14 with 90 seconds left, it felt like, or 2 minutes left against the Pistons last night to force overtime, and they got the dub. And the Clippers are now 5.5-point underdogs going to Toronto here. Now, the Clippers team is on a back end of a back-to-back. Kawhi Leonard, I believe, is off the injury report, but we haven't had any updates for the rest of this team since last night. So keep an eye on this Clippers team. The 130 injury report will be really key here. I do think we might see some guys potentially rest, that being, I believe John Wall has already been ruled potentially doubtful on a back-to-back. I'm not sure, but keep an eye on this Clippers situation as they're on the back end of the back-to-back. With this Clippers team fully healthy, it's tough to go to these guys. It's usually going to be Kawhi and Paul George that lead their usage. They're fine to take on tournament options, but the way their minutes are spread out and their usage is spread out and their price, it really doesn't make me all that interested in them. As Kawhi Leonard's minutes go up, I've been willing to take chances on him more than Paul George when they play together. PG comes in at 8,600. Kawhi comes in at 7,900. I think they're fine tournament options, nothing too exciting. They're going to be awfully low owned, and they're priced up over there on FanDuel 92 and 8,100 to the point where for the amount of minutes Kawhi's playing, that seems appropriate. No one's really mispriced here. They're getting an extra body and a high usage player in Kawhi back. It kind of makes the rest of the team less appealing here. So how do you feel about the Clippers team as they go to Toronto?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on who's playing. We don't have an injury report yet since they played yesterday. So I don't know. I assume Kawhi's coming back since he rested yesterday. I don't know if George will play on the back-to-back or not. For now, I'm assuming he is. John Wall, played yesterday. I guess probably won't play today, but don't know. Have to wait and kind of find out all of that. But if we assume that Kawhi and George are in, George is down to 8,600 on DraftKings. That is certainly still playable. Would look a lot better if Kawhi does for whatever reason, sit both halves of the back-to-back, George would look like a huge priority. But if Kawhi's back, you can still play George at 8,600. That's still a little bit too cheap of a price tag for somebody that's going to play 35, 36 minutes and is as good as Paul George is. Kawhi coming in at 7,900, I think is more difficult to get to. Should play around 32 minutes, is obviously really good, but I think pretty much correctly priced, assuming we're not going to see him play more. Zubats at 4,600 is also really, really interesting to me. He will look better if Kawhi sits or George sits. If one of them is out, it helps free up those minutes for Zubats. But either way, if they're both in, you should still expect that you're getting at least like 26 to 28 minutes from Zubats, if not more. Like you can very easily still get 30 plus minutes from him, and he's only 4,600 on DraftKings. That's just a ridiculous price tag for Ivica Zubats in any situation, given that he's a fantasy point per minute guy. So I really, really like Zubats no matter what. I like him more if one of George or Kawhi are out. I like George at 8,600 no matter what. I like him a hell of a lot more if Kawhi is out. Other than that, there's not a ton that I like here. Marcus Morris coming in at 5,300. He's another one that, looks slightly better if one of the two main guys sits. Reggie Jackson looks slightly better, assuming John Wall is out, because you can give him a couple extra minutes at 4,800. But he's still Reggie Jackson and he's still awful. So a lot of moving parts here, but you kind of have an idea of who you're going to like regardless.
Yeah, I definitely think the injury report here will be key. And if we have certain news that pans our way, I'm a deeper dive is there. Live for lock. We'll definitely break that down later on the night. But onto the Toronto side we go. Toronto team always fun to go in tournaments because the minutes, how they're concentrated to guys like Siakam, OG, Scotty Barnes, and Van Vliet. Gary Trent's been coming off the bench, so those minutes haven't been as high as they once were. But I have interest in all four of those guys who we can expect at least mid-30s minutes in a Nick Nurse rotation. I like taking some chances on any four of those guys. I think OG will get a significant amount of ownership at that price tag. I have no issues going to him. I have no issues going to any of the other three guys. Siakam continues to have monster games at sub 5% ownership night in and night out. He's 10-4 on FanDuel. Yeah, it'll be difficult, but man, he is on a tear of late. And I've missed out on some nights. I've been there some nights, but I think Siakam's been for real. And I think we can definitely take some chances there. He has 60-point fantasy upside, it seems like, and you'll definitely take that at 10-4. But the rest of the team, the rest of the guys who play a lot of minutes, I certainly think they're worth taking some chances on. They're a bit more priced on FanDuel, so it makes things a little bit more difficult there as Barnes comes in at 7,300 and OG's at 75. Van Vliet's all the way up at 8,800, but they all have tournament upside. I definitely think it's worth taking some chances on tournaments for sure. Do you have a preference in going to Raptors in any specific order?
No, I think it's kind of just depends on what price tier you're in. Clearly, Siakam is my favorite guy to get to. Once again, he's only getting 2% ownership. We have him with about a 6% chance of being optimal. So, given the salary, relatively low chances of being in the optimal lineup, but just a massive ceiling for him playing 40 plus minutes whenever the game's competitive. He's averaged 1.34 DraftKings points per minute in 20 games with Van Vliet active this year, 37.5 minute average in those games, 30% usage rate, 31.5% assist percentage. Still just looks very, very good if you can get to him. I think that there is still sticker shock when you say, Pascal Siakam's north of 10K, but he's completely deserved it because while like 1.3 to 1.35 fantasy points per minute is kind of borderline to be a 10K player, like that's kind of what you see with Damian Lillard. The difference is just you get so many minutes from Siakam. So it just makes it pretty appealing. Fred VanVleet coming in at 7,600. OG coming in at 6,200. I think those guys both look pretty good as well. Anunoby's the only one from this team pulling ownership at 18% on DraftKings. I think that's because he has shooting guard, small forward eligibility in addition to being cheap. So it's just a situation where in a lot of different roster builds, you can just be like, oh, OG Anunoby fits here. So I think, that makes some sense. But no ownership coming into Van Vliet at 7,600 makes him appealing. No ownership coming into Siakam makes him appealing. I think those are the three main guys for me.
Yeah, I definitely think great tournament team across the board. I certainly think in a Clippers spot where it's worth taking some chances on for sure here. And also, I want to let everyone know who's watching that you can get 2 free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum if using a risk-free bet up to $1,000 at BetMGM. You can find this link in the YouTube description for sure. If you're listening to us on any podcast platform, please leave that 5-star review. This go a long way as we wrap up this 2022 calendar year. Time just fucking flies, man. All right. On to the next game we go. It is Atlanta On to Indiana. As Atlanta's 1.5 point favorites, 236.5 total. Indiana's on a back end of a back to back. Atlanta side of things, it's another team that leads their usage with Trae Young and then DeJounte Murray situation here. In an Indiana spot, I like taking some chances on both of them here. I believe Clint Capella remains out here. So in a situation with Miles Turner on the other side, wouldn't shock me if Onyeka Okongwu gets to start again. There was a game that he did come off the bench and they did do Collins at the 5, but in a Vooch matchup, they did move back Okongwu to the starting lineup. But Trae Young and DeJounte Murray in an Indiana spot, I love them. I love taking chances on them in tournaments for sure. I like their tournament upside they bring to the table. Rarely will I fall on both of them in the same lineup here, but in a situation against Indiana at their price tag, Trae Young comes at $9,800. I like DeJounte Murray quite a bit at 83 on DraftKings. By a distant amount, those savings can go a long way. And 99 and 8,500 on FanDuel, same situation here. I prefer DeJounte to Trae, but no issues getting to above the field on both of these guys in an Indiana spot. I like both of these guys. How do you feel about Trae Young and DeJounte?
Yeah, they both look like pretty good tournament options because neither one's getting ownership. Both pulling around 3% ownership on DraftKings right now. Trae Young coming in at 9,800, certainly fine with that. You mentioned the cheaper price tag on DeJounte. He's 8,300. Murray's averaged 1.11 DraftKings points per minute in the games he's played with Young this year, averaging 36 minutes per game. Young's at 1.36 DraftKings points per minute in 35 minutes per game. So both of those guys are certainly, high upside options at their respective salaries at modest ownership. We'll need to see what the starting lineup looks like here. I agree they could go back to Okongwu. I think that's probably what they will do, but we need to see, what that looks like. But assuming that they do go back to Okongwu, he's 5,500. He's pulling 11% ownership. He's likely to play around 30 minutes or so. Could certainly play more. We've seen him average 30 to 32 minutes as a starter over the last couple of seasons. We had him play a ton of minutes as a starter recently. He does take a little bit of a hit in production as a starter because Trae Young just saps stats away from everybody he's on the floor with. But still, Okongwu will still look good at 5,500 if he's starting. John Collins at 5,400, I think is a little bit underpriced as well. He's not on a minutes restriction anymore. We saw him play 29 minutes last game, but that also was a game that the Hawks won by 25 points. So he didn't close, whereas normally he would have. I think it's likely that you can get 30 plus minutes from Collins here at 5,400. He is more valuable when he's playing center. So that's something to keep in mind with regard to the starting lineup. If Okongwu starts, it's a little bit worse for Collins, but still fine. But if they were to start Collins at the 5, then he's going to look even better. But one way or the other, I'm going to like John Collins here. And he is pulling some ownership, 18%, leading the team on DraftKings, ahead of Okongwu's 11%. DeAndre Hunter is questionable at 5K. If he's in, he's a perfectly reasonable last guy into your lineup. Should play 34 minutes or so, barring foul trouble. If he's out, you probably get Bogdan Bogdanovic back in the starting lineup. He does or should take a hit in production now that DeJounte Murray and Trae Young are both healthy, but you also would probably get low to mid 30s from him with shooting guard, small forward eligibility. So whichever of Hunter or Bogdanovic starts, I don't think either one ends up looking like a priority, but I think either one ends up just being somebody that you can kind of land on as a last piece.
Yeah, I think great tournament team across the board on both sides. And I definitely think taking some chances on tournaments could certainly pan out in an Indiana spot. It's weird to see Trae Young and DeJounte Murray being the lower owned guys on this team, projected ownership right now, but certainly that could change. And feeling spots to like the guys you said, Collins and Bogdanovic. Especially with the Hunter situation here. Any final thoughts on Atlanta before we move on to Indiana?
No, but if this guy doesn't ask Thomas Bryant why he didn't close the game, he should just never be allowed in this chat again.
Dang, you don't have to be an asshole, Adam. I was about to cover his breakfast if he asked him.
Yeah, I'll let him keep watching our free shows.
Well, since the show is free, click that like button for us and subscribe button if you haven't subscribed by now. And also hit that notification bell because you can get notified whenever shows like this do go live. Also, outside of that, I do have a prize picks mentioned to talk about a little free pick in that Lakers game, specifically. Right now, our data and tools team expect Dennis Schroeder to hit the under on 4.5 assists over there on price pick. Seems like a solid starting point with an expected win percentage at 67%. I'll touch on some other picks later in the show, specifically in that Phoenix-Memphis matchup. So stay tuned over there. for some exciting price picks over and check out the link in description for that free offer we have going. On to the next game. Houston taking on Boston. Houston is 14.5 point underdogs with the 229.5 total. And on the Houston side, they kind of have their little mini three in Şengün and Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green. Jabari Smith has been playing better of late. I've been playing him quite aggressively. It's kind of worked out as the minutes. He's performing better fantasy wise in point per minute production. But KPJ 7-3, Alfred Şengün 5-8, and Jalen Green comes in at 6-7. In a Boston spot, obviously, Boston is a solid defensive team. But when there's concentrated usage in guys like Green and Porter Jr., I feel like their ceiling can be upwards of combining to shoot 40 plus times a game. And that alone always has me interested in these guys in tournaments, regardless of matchup and sometimes price. But the price here seems like I'm worthwhile taking some chances on, even with Şengün at 5,800. Do you have a preference in Porter Jr., Şengün, and Jalen Green, or is this kind of a stay away spot? Şengün's getting a decent amount of ownership right now in a center only matchup, center only position for Şengün at just under 18%. How do you feel about this Rockets team?
Yeah, so I'm really surprised about the ownership coming into Şengün just because it is a 10-game slate and you're going to have a lot of centers that look pretty similar to him. And there is legitimate risk here. We talk a lot about not projecting blowouts. This is a 15-point spread, Houston, 15-point road dogs. This game very easily could blow out. And even if it doesn't, like Şengün averages around 27 minutes per game. I think that he's a good play. But at 17, 18% ownership, it is a spot, if that holds, where I probably do sort of pivot and just go elsewhere and hope that he just isn't the best scoring center. I do, obviously like the upside he offers, though. Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. are a bit different. Green pulling 6%, Porter pulling 3%. I'm not confident in them at all either. It is a tough matchup against Boston. There is a reasonable chance that they're not playing in the fourth quarter. But if this game's close, it probably means one of Şengün, Green, or Porter went off, and you do get massive upside, as we saw yesterday where Kevin Porter Jr. dropped 61 fantasy points at like 3% owned. So the ceiling is certainly there. But the other thing to keep in mind is we've already talked, we're like halfway through the slate. We've already talked about a bunch of other guards where it's just like, oh, well, they have a high ceiling and they're not getting any ownership. Van Vliet, Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, Bradley Beal. So I don't think that they're priorities here, but I think they're certainly, in tournaments, guys you can get to for the ceiling.
Yeah, I think I expect that Şengün ownership to evolve and probably drop throughout the day. The guy who's getting a lot of ownership in the secondary parts of this team is KJ Martin. He's getting a lot of ownership on FanDuel specifically. That's a situation on a 10-game slate. I'll be looking to pivot off an ownership like that. Just a little too high for me with KJ Martin coming in at that type of.
I assume the assumption is that Eric Gordon's not going to play.
That's what it seems like, and expect these ownership changes to change a lot throughout the day. And that's why you should sign up for a free 3-day trial that we have going over there. And seems like I pulled a quick one and I missed talking about Indiana. We'll wrap up this game and we'll go back to Indiana. But let's move on to Boston side of things. And do you have any final thoughts on Houston?
No.
Yeah, okay. On to the Boston side we go. Tatum, Brown, Marcus Smart. Tatum looks outstanding, in my opinion, in terms of getting above the field on it in a Houston matchup. It's really the guy who I'll have the most interest in. Derek White's getting a lot of ownership, but on a 10-game slate, I'll be looking to pivot off of some of that. I don't mind taking some chances on Al Horford or Robert Williams just because of a Houston spot. I do think this is a matchup where Robert Williams could thrive in an up-tempo spot, but those minutes are extremely volatile. In a situation like this, any interest in taking chances on Tatum getting above the field on him or any other Boston player, in your opinion?
Yeah, I kind of think across the board, Boston's interesting because the only guy getting ownership is Derek White. He's 4,200, so I understand why he's getting ownership. You're likely to get around 28 minutes or so from him in a favorable spot. Boston has a 123 implied total. Again, there's a decent chance that nobody meaningful from Boston's playing down the stretch, but that's not a guarantee. I mean, if this game could end up being a 15-point finish, and if it's just 15 points from start to finish, you're getting most of the fourth quarter from your Boston guys. So, it's still far from a guarantee that this game is a blowout. And I think that is the spread is probably driving down ownership projections a bit. The other thing to keep in mind is that when you're talking about the team that would likely be on the winning end of the blowout, if the game does blow out, there's a good chance that they're just producing at very high per minute rates compared to their averages. So, even if like it's pretty easy to get a situation where like, oh, Jaylen Brown only played 32 minutes, but instead of 1.2 fantasy points per minute, he scored 1.4, and it didn't matter that he played fewer minutes. So that's, another thing to keep in mind when it comes to blowouts. So Tatum not getting any ownership, 10-4 seems pretty appealing. Similar to Siakam, I think. Jaylen Brown at 9,200, also pretty appealing with shooting guard, small forward eligibility, like the upside he offers in tournaments. You mentioned the front court with Horford and Williams. You should get around 30 minutes from Horford here. I have no idea how many minutes you're going to get from Robert Williams, but the fact that he did play 22 minutes 2 games ago makes him appealing in tournaments at no ownership. If he plays 22 minutes at 4,400, he's going to project well. The downside is that, last game against Milwaukee, he played 14 minutes. And if he does that here, then clearly you're not going to want to be there. So I think projecting Williams for around 20 minutes, 18 to 20 minutes makes sense. At no ownership, that's certainly a spot where you can gamble. Just, don't be surprised if he doesn't play a lot. Malcolm Brogdon, 5,300, another one where everybody's playing Derek White here. Derek White played 30 minutes last game. Brogdon played 17. That's not always going to be the split. Brogdon averages 23 to 24 minutes per game off the bench. If you project him for 24 minutes, you project White for 27 or 28, Brogdon's going to show up a decent amount of the time. So I think that split in ownership where White's getting 15% and Brogdon's getting 1 is a little bit too big, even considering that Brogdon's $1,100 more expensive.
Yeah, it's a great tournament team on both sides across the board. I really liked targeting Boston against this Houston matchup for sure. Now I want to go back to Indiana. My apologies there as I was zooming forward here on this 10-game slate. Going back to Indiana here, they are taking on Atlanta at home. They're on a back end of the back-to-back. And with Indiana, I'm always going to keep my eyes on Tyrese Halliburton and potentially Miles Turner as well. Turner started off the game really well last night and lost a lot of minutes due to that blowout against that shorthanded Pelicans team. I like going kind of back to this Indiana team, especially Halliburton and Turner. No issues getting above the field on both of these guys, but everyone else on this team is a bunch of meh. I just don't ever get to much of this team outside of Halliburton and Turner in significant fashion. But in an Atlanta spot, can you make a case for guys like Buddy Hield, Nemhard, Ben Matherin, anyone else? I mean, I feel like Halliburton and Turner are the way to go, but no one really else.
Yeah, I mean, I think Halliburton and Turner are the ones that stand out, especially at these falling price tags. Turner at 6,300, Halliburton at 9K. Obviously, Halliburton's coming off of an awful game yesterday, but you can't read anything into that. Turner played 25 and a half minutes in 3 quarters. You were likely getting 30 plus if this game had been competitive. He's about a 1.2 fantasy point per minute guy, so you certainly get a very high ceiling there. Buddy Hield at 6K, kind of similar to OG in that, like, I'm never excited about getting to Buddy Hield, but he should play 32 to 34 minutes if this game's competitive. He has shooting guard, small forward eligibility. He's just going to fit pretty nicely into lineups. Nemhard at 4,400 is the one that I think I probably have the most trouble getting to. I get that he's cheap and that he's likely to play around 32 minutes. The issue is that when he's on the floor with Halliburton, his point per minute production just falls off a cliff. He was very good when Halliburton was out and he was, playmaking and scoring and all of that, but he's not asked to do any of that stuff when he's playing with Halliburton and Turner and Hield, and sometimes you have Matherin out there. It's just not what they need him to do. So a popular Nemhard isn't that appealing to me. The other spot I think you could look at in tournaments, Miles Turner pulling 18% ownership, and I agree he should be popular. Jalen Smith at 4K is only getting 1.5%. Smith's somebody that we saw pulling like 10% ownership on a shorter slate a couple of days ago, and I said I didn't really want to get there because his playing time is entirely dependent on Miles Turner. Turner ended up getting in foul trouble. Smith played 23 minutes and smashed, but that's just what you're going to get with Jalen Smith here is he's going to play whatever minutes Miles Turner is not on the floor. Did play a little bit alongside him last game, but typically you're going to get Jalen Smith playing whatever minutes he's not on the floor. So it just creates a very volatile situation where when he's low owned, I do like taking some chances there in tournaments.
We got an exciting update from our YouTube chat, probably the most important update we'll ever get on NBA Strategy Show from 3 Boom, saying he went up to Thomas Bryant and asked him he's about his shoulder. He said his shoulder is sore. He can't move but his AC joint is causing him issues. And the reason why he didn't play was Darvin Ham was pissed at the whole team. So there you go. Exciting update about Thomas Bryant. Now I want to say thank you. Thanks for providing that update. Hopefully you're telling us the truth, but I appreciate that update. And sorry about that, a miss over there with Indiana. We're now going to move forward to San Antonio and OKC. And the Spurs are 7-point dogs at Oklahoma City with a 235.5 total. And on the San Antonio side of things, this team was on a back end of back to back. Devin Vassell balled out last night, as Vassell was really impressive in terms of a fantasy perspective. There, and with Keldon Johnson being back at the picture, Jakob Poeltl's minutes, Pop had a very interesting code. It seems like a slow ramp up period with those minutes going forward. And we've seen the new fantasy production out of Jeremy Sohan, their lottery pick, kind of showing why he was drafted in the lottery, and really exciting to see how he's facilitating at random times, carrying the ball up the court. I do think that assist rate will improve throughout his young career. This team taking on OKC, solid tournament options, that being Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell. I don't mind sprinkling in some Jeremy Sohan. So it's a team that I'm willing to get above the field on in San Antonio. I like going to Keldon over Devin Vassell potentially right now, but very, very close, similar options for me. I'm skeptical with Jakob Poeltl because of the minutes, but in an OKC spot, in whatever minutes Poeltl gets at 5,700, he should eat. He's getting some ownership right now, but the reason I'm a little skeptical is because I don't see a pathway where he's going to play mid 30s minutes. I'm not so sure of what Pop is going to do with him on a back end of a back to back. Talking about the Spurs team, specifically the Jakob Poeltl situation.
Yeah, I mean, Pirtle's tough. We saw him seem like he was going to play around 28 minutes 2 games ago, but he got in foul trouble. Yesterday wasn't in foul trouble, still only played 24 minutes. Had a decent fantasy game, and he's a really good point per minute guy. So that's why trying to figure out his playing time is so important because, if you were to get 28 plus minutes, he's going to look really good. But at this point, I think you kind of have to project him for like 24, 25 minutes. At 5,700, it's going to make him look okay. But right now, pulling 14% ownership on a 10 gamer, again, it's just I probably will find other spots to get to. I played a good amount of him yesterday because he was going to be 1 or 2% owned. If he's going to pull 15%, I can find other centers to get to. I think the Jeremy Sohan ownership is absolutely batshit crazy. 47% going to Sohan. I get it. He's cheap. He's 4,100. I don't he's been starting all year. I don't know why people he's had a few good games in a row, but people seem to have just fallen in love with Jeremy Sohan. He started 18 games this year with Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell active. He's averaged 0.77 DraftKings points per minute in 24 and a half minutes per game. If he avoids foul trouble, you are likely to get around 30 minutes. So again, I think he's underpriced at 4,100. It's also a nice matchup against OKC. But if this ownership holds, we have him at 47%. If this ownership holds, I'm just going to find things to do other than Jeremy Sohan and hope that he just plays to his normal levels.
Yeah, Sohan's very going to be a very interesting decision point right now. If the slate started at 11 a.m. Eastern, it would be a really interesting decision point what to do with him at that projected ownership. I do think that will dip a little bit as certain value might open up. There are 20 teams on this slate, but he's the type of player that I would be looking to pivot off as well. I don't know how much under the field I would like to get on a guy like Sohan. I do think he's playing much better of late and the minutes are a bit higher of late. So maybe this is for real. I need to understand why he's performing much better. I know the injuries have helped him here, but someone comes in at 5,100 on FanDuel, I would be looking to look elsewhere, type of situation over there as well. But it's going to be an interesting decision point if this ownership holds all the way up until 7 p.m. Eastern. But solid tournament options across the board. I want to pivot off of Poeltl. I think there's so many better center options. There are 20 teams on this slate, so I'll look for guys who have a much better ceiling here. Is it worth taking some chances on the bench players? That being Zach Collins, Stanley Johnson's in the rotation here. Greatest California high school basketball player according to Jordan Klein. So he never lost a game in high school. So, but any options here for the bench players?
I don't really think so. Zach Collins, basically he's playing any minutes that Jakob Poeltl doesn't, but he's still 5,400 and center only on DraftKings, so that's not a spot that I really want to chase. The rest of the bench guys aren't very good. McDermott, not a good point per minute guy, neither is Stanley Johnson. Josh Richardson wasn't even in the rotation yesterday, which was surprising, but doesn't really matter for DFS. I do want to echo you, though, on Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell, both pulling around 7% ownership. I do think they're interesting tournament plays. Shooting guard, small forward on Vassell at 6,900, Keldon at 7,300. Vassell played 35 minutes yesterday. Keldon played 36. So nice to see that, in a competitive game, they are still getting their full run. They're both really high upside guys. So I do agree with you that they are pretty interesting at low ownership.
Yeah, onto the Oklahoma City side we go. OKC, it's SGA, and then it's everyone else. I mean, it's the SGA show, but this team is getting quite a bit of ownership, and where it makes me think about things a little bit more than I usually would with an OKC team. And I like SGA at 10K. There's no questions about that. I like going to him, even on FanDuel at 10-6. It might be a little bit difficult to get him there, but no issues. Giddy is obviously a bit more playable in my opinion. When he's sub 7K than above 7K. In a San Antonio spot, I can certainly get to some Giddy here, but this team's getting a ton of ownership where even Pokashevsky's up there as one of the highest projected owned guys here. I'm really yeah, it's waking me up in the situation with this team getting a lot of ownership. I'm like finding reasons in my head not to get to this type of ownership. How do you feel about this OKC team as probably one of the most owned teams that we've discussed on the show so far?
So one big thing to keep an eye on here is whether or not the G League guys that are currently listed as out on the injury report stay that way throughout the day. Because right now we have Omaruri, Lindy Waters, and Jalen Williams with a Y all listed as out in the G League. Obviously, none of those are guys that you're rostering in DFS regardless, but they are guys that they will just throw into the rotation if they're with Oklahoma City. So as long as they remain listed out, this team does look a little bit more appealing because Jeremiah Robinson Earl is still out as well. Usman Jang is still out as well. So they are relatively shorthanded here. In the last game, you had Lindy Waters play 9 minutes, but none of those other guys played. And in that game, even before overtime, you did get around 28 minutes from Pokashevsky, which is, the upper end of what we've seen him play in a long time. You got around 35 minutes from Lou Dort. You got about 30 from Giddy. You got your normal upper 30s from Gilgeous-Alexander. You only got 25 from Jalen Williams. Normally he plays around 30, but the point being, as long as those guys remain out, there is an increased chance that you actually get 28 minutes or so from Poku. It's not a guarantee because they still can just do a bunch of random shit. Like Darius Bazley only played 4 minutes in that game. Give Bazley 16 to 18 minutes, and very quickly you're getting Poku back down to like 24. Aaron Wiggins only played 6 minutes. So, like, there's still a lot of risk going to this team. Even though they played a tighter rotation last game, that's no guarantee they're going to today. Pokashevsky pulling 50% ownership is terrifying. At 4,300, he's kind of just at a price point where it's like, if he does actually get 28 to 30 minutes, there's a very, very, very good chance you're going to need him. But you also just have to consider that OKC can just play him 22 minutes. They do it all the time. So there is still risk going there, but I think he's a bit underpriced. I think he's a good value, but like it's very similar to Sohan, except Poku's a little bit better point per minute guy. But it's similar where, if they are underpriced, but it's just the ownership is kind of crazy given the volatility that they have. SGA at 10K, pretty much always going to be a good play. Giddy around 7K is always going to look good. Lou Dort has been playing more minutes recently as well. 4,900 is a little bit cheaper than he should be. So I get why all 5 of these guys, the assumed starting lineup, are getting ownership. I am really concerned about 50% going to Poku.
Yeah, this is a team that I think the ownership will drop throughout the day. Come the time you do a deeper dive, I do think this ownership will have shifted around. If it hasn't, man, it's another situation to talk about. Poku falls in that Sohan bucket, just trying to find reasons to find pivots. There are 19 other teams to look at with guys who have similar upside at that salary that I come in, 10th of that ownership right now. So there are a lot of options to pivot off of Poku potentially later on in the evening. Any final thoughts on OKC?
No, just try and take advantage of the fact that game starts at 8. So if you do end up playing 50% Poku, you have plenty of time to get to a bar before that game starts and put yourself in a position that you don't remember what he did.
And no, I mean Poku. It's just Mark Dagnall in his rotation. It's so difficult to understand what he's going to do night in and night out, even when he might even play a random guy 25 minutes.
Right.
And
well,
so
I mean, like it's easy. So I really appreciated that he answered this question the way he did, like very early in the season, because it has saved me a lot of time from trying to figure out their rotation. He was asked about his rotations, and he basically said, we don't have rotations. We're just trying to get data on like all these different combinations of guys playing together and see sort of what we have for the future. So he's like, and we're not even trying to get like big sample sizes. We just want a lot of data. So like he's intentionally just throwing shit on the floor and seeing what happens. So it saved me a lot of time from a projection standpoint, where it's just like there's no this guy subs in for this guy plays this position, he doesn't play alongside that guy. They just want to see it all, and so it's like his rotations are by design random.
Yeah, no, and that was definitely very nice of him just to let that out there, especially for us being DFS players at times. We just now just know what we can focus on. It's usually SGA, and feel confident in SGA, Dort, and Giddey's minutes, and everyone else. You can make an argument, and I'll be like, sure, and we can move on, type of situation.
Yeah.
Um,
I rely very, very heavily on the average playing time for this team, more so than others. Like others, it'll be like, all right, well, they're averaging 32, but this guy's out, or they've run this rotation, a tighter rotation in the last few games. OKC, I rely very heavily on. It's like, oh, okay, Poku played 28 last game. He's averaging 24 over his last 10. I'm still probably going to go to 24. Whereas other teams, I'll read more into their recent rotations.
agreed. Onto the Phoenix and Memphis team we go here. Phoenix is 8-point underdogs at Memphis. Memphis did play on Christmas, as did Phoenix. Phoenix was in an extremely overtime thriller. And the problem with Phoenix is they're out without Devin Booker tonight. And Devin Booker left the game within like 5 minutes of hurting his groin, and didn't return. And we saw Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton put up very good fantasy outcomes at the very low ownership that night. And here we are going back to a situation with no Booker. We dealt with this all last week before Christmas Day, and it's going to make these guys appealing in tournaments. That being Paul, Ayton, Bridges are the first three guys I look at. And I think I'm going to be willing to get above the field on all three of them. And then there's a bunch of guys who are getting some ownership with no Booker. The minutes do get split along Damian Lee, Josh Okogie, Torrey Craig. I wonder why we don't have Landry Shamet projected for anything. Looks like Shamet has been out with an Achilles soreness after Aaron Gordon put him in a coffin. So I think this team is going to be worth taking some chances on, even the secondary players. I like going to Paul, Aiden, and Bridges, but then I think my favorite might be Dwayne Washington Jr. at 3K just because of the price. And I do think those minutes can be, he could play the most minutes out of Lee and Okogie. It wouldn't shock me. And I really like taking some chances with Dwayne Washington Jr. Don't want to go to Josh Okogie. I know he's been playing better in this Phoenix system, but I can't go to him. No, there's no way. I don't want to play him. Talk to me about this Phoenix team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine getting to Okogie. Like he's been a fantasy point per minute guy this year. He's only 4K. Landry Shamet being out is a big deal. We saw this earlier in the year, and people kind of just like slept on it because it's Landry Shamet, and your initial thought is like, who cares? But it does open up more playing time, and Cameron Payne being out is a pretty big deal as well. You should see a lot of run from the combination of Josh Okogie and Damian Lee here. You probably get Ish Wainwright in the rotation. You should get Dwayne Washington as the backup center. I'm with you at 3K. I'm always interested in playing Washington. I don't know that he'll get that many minutes because I'm not sure how willing they are to play him alongside Chris Paul. They've only played 2 minutes alongside each other all season. So I think it's likely that Washington just backs up Chris Paul directly. And then you get a lot of minutes for Damian Lee. You get a lot of minutes for Josh Okogie. Torrey Craig's minutes are solidified. Ish Wainwright joins the rotation and plays mid-teens. That's my expectation on how this goes. But at 3K for Washington, if he does run into 14 to 16 minutes, he certainly can pay that off because he's a good point per minute guy. But I like the Okogie price tag at 4K. I think Damian Lee at 4,400 is certainly reasonable as well, only pulling 7% ownership. Chris Paul's price tag's fallen a bit. He's down to 8K. He has played 5 games now without Devin Booker and with Ayton this year. 1.05 DraftKings points per minute. You typically overall see increased production from him without Booker on the floor, and I do expect that 1.05 fantasy point per minute that we've seen in the 5 games without Booker. I expect that to increase a little bit. 227 total minutes this year for Paul without Booker, 1.11 DraftKings points per minute. DeAndre Ayton in 197 minutes without Booker, 1.28 DraftKings points per minute. Bridge is only at 0.77, but that's on 46% true shooting. That's likely to come up. He's likely to play 38 to 40 minutes here at 6,400. So I think he's a reasonable option as well. Paul and Ayton, I think, are the ones I get to first. Okogie, Bridges, Lee are the second tier for me.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to break down. I'm not that interested in Okogie. I think he's probably towards the bottom for me, but I think Dwayne Washington Jr. was my preference here. So yeah, I think it's a good tournament team. Obviously, no Booker, a lot of usage should be spread around, and no Landry Shamet, who played a bunch of minutes in his absence, is also out here. On to Memphis we go. Memphis, kind of all bark, no bite with the situation against Golden State. They were talking that they'll be fine in the West, and I don't think you can lose to that Golden State team, that shorthanded Golden State team, the way they did there. John Morant comes in at 10-3, and on FanDuel is 10-1. Really like that FanDuel price tag. Morant, obviously a solid tournament option, but it's less so when guys like Bane are back in the picture here. Jaren Jackson Jr., God damn, this guy really just can't keep his hands to himself. 6,800. Really burned my Christmas Day slate, and I shouldn't have been surprised at 7,400 on FanDuel. Just a solid tournament option for these guys across the board. Dylan Brooks, another guy. Just getting bullied by this Golden State team was fun to see. Dylan Brooks at $5,800 here. A team that's coming in quite low owned compared to other teams on the slate. I like getting to Morant. I think the Bane minutes are slowly creeping up, but I think Bane, if you want to play him, you can do that 7,100 on FanDuel. At price tag on DraftKings, I want to stay away. How do you feel about this Memphis team on this Phoenix matchup? Very low ownership, so appealing tournament spots, but that's really about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in the ownership just because there are so many good players on this team, and this team does have a 117 total. The issue is just that Desmond Bane coming back does cut into John Morant's production a bit. It cuts into Jaren Jackson and Dylan Brooks, and Bane's still probably not playing enough minutes that you really want to play him at 7,500. So it just creates a situation where it's tough to point to any one thing you really want to get to. But I think you can throw John Morant into that bucket with low-owned Trae Young, low-owned Siakam, low-owned Tatum, where, I mean, he's a superstar. Like, he can just go out there and dominate any given game. He's still very, very productive with Desmond Bane active. He's just not as productive as when he's out. The one spot that does stand out to me, and this is just becoming a normal thing, Steven Adams at 5,200 is getting 5% ownership. Brandon Clark at 4,600 is getting no ownership. Almost like necessarily one of them has to have a good game for their salary because they're very likely to split 48 minutes in some way. On Christmas Day, you got 27 from Clark, 21 from Adams because of the blowout. If this game's competitive, though, you're likely to get 28 from Adams, 20 from Clark. One way or the other, I think that there is upside for these guys. Steven Adams is certainly one of those centers where if Alperen Şengün is going to pull 20% ownership and was it Pirtle had 15, I think it was. Adams is a perfectly reasonable pivot there. He's not as exciting as those guys, but he isn't going to lose to them as often as the projected ownership suggests that he will.
Yeah, and I think it's the ownership is what makes this team appealing right now. And I don't expect any breaking injury news. The only downside here, a team that's fully healthy, and some of these guys have been priced as if Desmond Bane were to be out. So I do expect their price to correct over the next 7 to 10 days, where this Memphis team will be more appealing on other slates going forward for sure. Much more appealing team on FanDuel, just because the way they're priced, but no issues taking a stand and getting above the field on one or two of these guys in tournaments at all. On to the next game we go. Click that like button for us. And if you're listening on a podcast, leave that 5-star review. On to the Knicks and Dallas side of things. Knicks are 5.5-point underdogs with the 220 total. And this Knicks team, last game against Christmas, we saw Jalen Brunson leave towards the end there. And we saw Julius Randle put up a monster game. Now, Brunson in his return to Dallas is questionable with a sore hip, I believe. So that's going to be a really important talking point with Brunson here. If Brunson were to be out, I expect quickly to start in that situation here. And that will give potentially more minutes, obviously, to Miles McBride. We might see Derrick Rose recrack the rotation, maybe. Not so sure. But if Brunson plays, I think you can definitely play Brunson. I have no issues going to there. And Julius Randle had a monster Christmas Day game. I don't see that happening again at that fashion, but a solid tournament option. RJ Barrett, always a type of player who I have interested in smaller slates, not so much in a slate with 10 games. I know he did drop 44 points 2 games ago. You like the minutes he plays, but that's really about it. Also, Mitchell Robinson had another monster game against Embiid. I was definitely not on that as much as I would have liked it to be. How do you feel about this Knicks team? A team where the minutes are obviously you like the Tibbs rotation, and also the situation with Brunson being questionable. It will open up things for us in terms of tournament value for sure.
Yeah, it's an unappealing matchup against a very, very slow Dallas team, and as a result, you only have a 107 implied total for the Knicks. But that's still somewhat offset by the fact that they just play so many minutes, their starters at least. So Julius Randle coming in at 9,300, Brunson at 74. If Brunson plays, he looks very good at this price tag. He's been playing more minutes recently as a result of the condensed rotation. Last game, like you said, he missed the final 4.5 minutes of the game, but he still played 35 minutes. This is somebody that overall this season has been averaging like 32 or 33 minutes. So you still have this relatively inexpensive price tag that just is not correct for him to be playing 35, 36 plus minutes. So he's going to look really good. Julius Randle in competitive games is giving you 40 minutes. I think projecting him around 38 makes sense. Again, slow-paced Dallas team, so not the best matchup, but still a very good fantasy producer. He also could see a little bit of a bump if Brunson is out in terms of playmaking, but one way or the other, I think Randle at 4% ownership is interesting. RJ Barrett, price tag's getting up there. I've been under the field on him a lot recently, and it hasn't really gone that well for me. But now he's not getting ownership since he is more expensive. That's a time where I don't mind getting to some Barrett, just because in competitive games he is playing 42 minutes, which is just insane. But you're seeing 42, 44, 45 minutes from Barrett. I think projecting 39 is reasonable, maybe 40, but if the game does come down to the wire, you're likely to get more. The issue is just that price tag has come up to 7,500 as well. So certainly not a priority, but interesting just because he plays so many minutes and he's so cheap. And then you get to Mitchell Robinson as another center around 5K that just isn't getting ownership. You should get 28 to 30 minutes from him. It's a favorable spot against the Dallas front court as far as, Christian Wood just being Christian Wood. But still, plenty of volatility with Robinson. He's just shy of a fantasy point per minute guy. He doesn't project great, but he does look a little bit underpriced here and just isn't getting ownership. So in tournaments, I do have some interest getting there just because you get so much block upside with him. There is some volatility. He certainly has a path to just putting up a monster game.
Yeah, this is another important piece of news just to wait on throughout, obviously, deeper dive and live before lock. And I'm sure you might have a different breakdown come deeper dive over there. So I think it's an interesting piece to keep an eye on, especially with Brunson and what that usage will transpire once the game starts over here. On the Dallas side of things, it's Luka, and we've been seeing Christian Wood start of late. I think he's obviously in play in a Knicks spot, but Tim Hardaway Jr. was splashing threes in that third quarter, left and right. Reggie Bullock played a handful of minutes, quite a bit more minutes than we're used to. This team is dealing with guys who are questionable and out. They're kind of low-key shorthanded. We've been seeing Davis Bertans crack the rotation, playing small rotation stints. Dwight Powell continues to play minutes, but always finds a way to get in foul trouble here. I like going to Luka. You're always going to have some interest in Luka in tournaments. No issues whatsoever falling on Luka tonight. As I have some interest in going to Wood, but man, I know we were both burned by Dinwiddie on Christmas Day as he just was put up another dud in terms of salary. I like going back to Dinwiddie. I think the minutes are solid. I don't mind going to Hardaway as well. It's a Dallas team where I think they make a very appealing tournament spot just because they're kind of shorthanded, and we'll see what happens with the situation with Kemba and Ntilikina. I think there are some minutes to be opened up for sure if those guys are out. I like sprinkling in some Bullock, not that aggressively whatsoever. He's a tough guy to get to. 3-point bonus on DraftKings there. I like Luka. I think my preference go Luka, Dinwiddie, and Wood in tournaments right now, just because I think Dinwiddie should be able to turn things around. It's been disappointing, but talk to me about this Dallas team.
So the playing time recently has been very, very encouraging, and it is, like you said, as a result of them being kind of sneakily shorthanded because nobody cares, from a fantasy standpoint, nobody cares about Dorian Finney-Smith, nobody cares about Josh Green, nobody cares about Maxi Kleber, so it's easy for them to get ruled out, and you're just like, yeah, whatever, Dallas is healthy because Luka's healthy and Hardaway's healthy and Dinwiddie's healthy, but they're missing a lot of minutes. Kleber plays 26 minutes a night. Josh Green plays around 20. Dorian Finney-Smith plays around 30. That's a lot of rotation minutes available. And then you also have Kemba Walker and Frank Ntilikina questionable. So you're getting a lot of minutes from these main Dallas pieces. On the one hand, that's really good for Spencer Dinwiddie because he is giving you, 38 to 40 minutes a night. The thing that you need to keep in mind is that those rates do come down because not only is he playing more minutes, Luka's playing more minutes, and Christian Wood is playing a lot more minutes, and those minutes are alongside Dinwiddie and Luka. So, for one, a lot of Dinwiddie's production comes because they stagger him and Luka's minutes. So, when you're getting like 32, 34 minutes a night from Dinwiddie and like 36 or 37 from Luka, you're talking about like 10 to 12 minutes out of 32 where Dinwiddie's playing without Luka. Now, like, sure, you're getting 38 minutes from Dinwiddie, but if Luka's going to play 40 minutes, you're only getting those 8 minutes where Luka's not on the floor. So the extra playing time is still nice for Dinwiddie, but I do think it's important to kind of keep in mind that the rates come down as a result of Luka playing more minutes. And then also Christian Wood playing alongside them. He's a much, much, much higher usage guy than Dwight Powell. So that cuts into Dinwiddie's production as well. I still think based on the minutes, he's a reasonable option, but certainly we want to pay attention to the ownership there. He's getting 1% right now. Happy to get to him at that. If you were getting, another slate where he was pulling 20, 25%, I'd probably come in under the field. I'm interested to see what the starting lineup is here. Dwight Powell started the second half in place of Reggie Bullock last game. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they go that route here against the Mitchell Robinson and Julius Randle front court. If they do, I'm not that interested in Powell, but he'd be a high risk option at 3,300. One way or the other, though, I'm interested in Christian Wood. I think one of the bigger mistakes I made on the Christmas Day slate was sort of backing off of him because we've seen him play huge minutes without Maxi Kleber, but the game before Christmas, he only played 28 minutes. You kind of got those rotations where you could tell Jason Kidd just like was tired of watching Christian Wood be on the floor and gave more minutes to Dwight Powell. So I only gave him 30 minutes in that game. I had cut him from 32 to 30 and obviously ended up playing like 39 minutes going off. I think as long as Wood's playing well, the minutes are there for him. And that's really all you can ask from a fantasy standpoint because if Christian Wood isn't playing well and he ends up playing 28 minutes, it doesn't really matter because he wasn't playing well. He wasn't getting you fantasy points. If he is playing well, knowing he can get to 38 minutes is really, really appealing. I think projecting him around 32, maybe 34 minutes makes sense. He's not getting any ownership, and I think that he should be, especially because he has power forward eligibility. Luka looks great. As always, he's playing a ton of minutes. Happy to get to him at 12K if I can. Tim Hardaway Jr. also playing increased minutes with this team shorthanded at 5,800, not getting any ownership. I don't mind taking some shots there either.
Yeah, I think this is a team to take chances on tournaments across the board. I definitely think, like you broke it down really well. A lot of non-DFS guys who we don't really target in tournaments really are out. It's tough when guys are playing alongside Luka to take advantage of them, but there are minutes available, and everyone's playing a little bit more minutes than usual over there. Also, we got an exciting new betting product for you guys to take advantage of. It's called NBA Bet Pro, and last night I was fortunate enough to make up my losses by taking advantage of NBA Bet Pro, and I took the under on one of the props that the tool recommended, and I made up all my losses in DFS, which was really nice way to end my night. Take advantage of a 3-day trial that we have going over there. It's an exciting new tool that our data and tools team have put together. They've also made a new metric where they can you can use to allocate what percentage of your bankroll per bet that you should do, and also more importantly, you can also see the EV or return on investment that you can expect over a long period of time for that bet. So take advantage of this tool. I know many states are getting sports betting legalized as well. And also in NBA Bet Pro, you get the Prize Picks tool as well, which is our sponsor for the slate. And like I mentioned, we had the under. I'll give you another free pick for Chris Paul. Chris Paul right now has a prop line of 3.5, and we have the projected at just over 4.5 with an expected win percentage of 67%. And I know it's a new tool, and there's a learning curve whenever we drop some new tools, but don't hesitate to drop some questions. You can definitely send me a tweet with some questions about NBA Bet Pro, and I'll happily get back to you having conversations with our data and tools team who have put together a very solid and exciting tool that I've been able to use and make some money off of it. And I know a lot of people already have been making a lot of money off of it as well. So find that link in the description below. Check out NBA Bet Pro starting today with that 3-day trial. Also, as we wrap up this 10-game slate, another late night hammer with Charlotte taking on Golden State. Charlotte is 4.5 point underdogs at Golden State with a massive 236.5 total here. Charlotte's on the back end of a back to back as they played Portland last night. And the interesting situation here at which Charlotte was kind of sneaky with Nick Richards being out. I thought Mason Plumlee would play a bit more minutes. He was disappointing fantasy wise, but it's a little LaMelo Ball show here. He's been balling of late. Those minutes look fine. The ankle looks good. He looks outstanding to go to yet again in tournaments. But in this matchup, I don't mind going to guys like Rozier, Oubre, and Gordon Hayward. And there might be more opportunity for PJ Washington to play some minutes at the five with no Nick Richards. It'll be a matter of time. I do think Miles Bridges will return to this team shortly, and this rotation will get out of whack. As I think he's closing in on signing a contract with them, as he's been dealing with the off the court drama that he was part of. I do think he'll be part of this team early, maybe mid January, potentially. So we're going to be dealing with this rotation for a couple more weeks before that changes up. But in a Golden State matchup, I have no issues to getting above the field on a couple of these players, two or three of these players in a Golden State matchup. I really like LaMelo Ball. I'm sure you'll have some interest in going to him. Talk to me about this Charlotte team, and is there a certain player that you want to get aggressively above the field on?
It's just another spot where I'm kind of confused why this team isn't getting more ownership because they play pretty big minutes. They're in a favorable spot against Golden State. The price tags are reasonable, but LaMelo coming in at 8% ownership, certainly happy to get there, if not, get above that. He's playing a ton of minutes. As long as he avoids foul trouble, you're getting 36 plus minutes from LaMelo on a nightly basis. I've mentioned it before, but his rebounding numbers are down a little bit this year, but they are coming back. I don't know that he gets back to like the 11% mark he was at last year, just because the Hornets do play bigger than they did last year, at least for right now. But still, he's going to look very, very good. I certainly like getting him at 9,600. We don't have an injury report for them yet, but if we assume that Nick Richards isn't playing today, I'm with you where you certainly could get more playing time from Mason Plumlee at 5,600 if you wanted to take some shots on him there, at only 5% ownership. But also $5,200 for PJ Washington, 6.5% ownership. I really like that play in tournaments in this spot. He played 32 and a half minutes yesterday against the Blazers. He closed at center despite Yusuf Nurkic being on the floor for the Blazers. There's absolutely no reason PJ Washington cannot close at the 5 against Golden State. I would think it's the most likely scenario. It allows you to get Kelly Oubre into the closing lineup over Mason Plumlee, and it just gives you a very solid closing lineup for Charlotte. I expect that to be the route that they go, and playing center minutes is beneficial for PJ Washington from a fantasy standpoint. So not only does it allow him to play 32 minutes, but you are getting an increase in rebounding, more production from PJ Washington when he's out there as the backup center. Ideally you would have gotten him just being staggered with Mason Plumlee yesterday, but they did throw Mark Williams into the rotation. So that's another spot to pay attention to on the injury report. If Nick Richards is out and Mark Williams were to be assigned to the G League, it would be a really, really good situation for PJ Washington. If Mark Williams is still up from the G League, then I think you get a similar rotation to yesterday where Williams is the backup center, except for PJ Washington closes at center. But one way or the other, I do think this is a really sneaky good spot for PJ Washington. Gordon Hayward's been playing 35 to 36 minutes. Rozier's playing a ton. Both of those guys are certainly playable in this matchup as well. So the entire team, sub 10%, just very interesting to me in tournaments, specifically LaMelo and PJ Washington.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very appealing team to go to tournaments. Agreed there. Onto the Golden State side we go. Jordan Poole got ejected I believe in the early fourth quarter or late third quarter for a second tack after he picked one up for taunting, I believe, earlier in the game. So Jordan Poole was ejected, so that's why his minutes were a bit on the lower side. But I like going back to Jordan Poole yet again. Klay Thompson looks another solid option to go to. The starters look solid to me for the Golden State team. I don't think I can get to any of these bench players. I know Wiseman's getting some ownership on FanDuel, but there's a way he could pay that salary off. If you want to play him, you certainly can. I like Poole. I like Klay. And I also like Draymond in the Charlotte matchup. I do think he can definitely a type of matchup that can suit to the way he scores fantasy points. I have no issues going above the field on this Golden State team. Just a game overall that really appeals to me in tournaments. DiVincenzo has been playing well at an elevated price tag as well. Rank me your Warriors. Do you have a preference in getting above the field on one or two or three of these players?
Yeah, so they're getting a lot more ownership than Charlotte is, which fine. Like I think they should be getting ownership. I just think Charlotte should also be getting ownership. But Jordan Poole, I think, is the one that looks the best to me at 8,200. Assuming he manages not to get ejected, you're just looking at around 36 minutes from him. He's averaged 1.3 DraftKings points per minute in the 5 games he's played without Curry and with Klay Thompson this year. He has a 39.3% usage rate in those games. That's going to come down, but it just kind of reiterates that, Jordan Poole is stepping into Steph Curry's usage plus bringing some of his own. This guy is not interested in giving up the ball. He is going to shoot a lot, and it just gives you a really, really high ceiling. 7K for Thompson looks solid as well. I don't expect much of a bump in usage because Jordan Poole is just taking all of it. But you're still talking about, like a 26% usage rate for Thompson. And most importantly, playing, 36 minutes in competitive games now. Played 40 last game. That was, where Poole got ejected. But I think you can, expect 36 minutes from Klay, and it's going to make him look pretty good. Draymond at 5,900. Never an exciting guy to get to, but he's playing more minutes recently as well. Typically project him for around 34. No, he can get to like 36, 37 if things go perfectly. Kevon Looney played 23 minutes last game. He hasn't really benefited from any of the injury stuff that we've seen. So I do think that he's getting a little bit too much ownership at 10%. He's 4,800. This is just another spot where, like, I think Kevon Looney's fine. It's a good matchup. He certainly could play more minutes here and play, 26 or 27. But if he's going to get 10% ownership and Steven Adams for 400 more is going to get half that ownership, or Mitchell Robinson's going to get 1/10 of that ownership, I'm fine just moving some of the Kevon Looney exposures to those guys. James Wiseman at 3,700, I thought was one of the biggest mistakes that the field made on Christmas Day, and they're not projected to go there now. I don't think that they should. It is kind of scary because he's cheap, and if he does get minutes, he's going to do well here. But most of his playing time recently has come in garbage time and when Golden State's been more shorthanded than they are now. So I'm expecting a similar rotation to what we saw Christmas Day, where he plays, 5 to 10 minutes, but that you get some Kuminga minutes at the 5, that Looney plays the bulk of the minutes at the 5. So I'm not really interested in Wiseman here. But I think all of the starters look pretty good. I am, again, like I said, I think Looney's going a little bit over-owned. I think you could argue that DiVincenzo is going a little bit under-owned. We've seen other guys in this price range at small forward today, like OG Anunoby pulling 18%. We had somebody else, I don't remember who it was, but another very similar guy in that price range. I don't think DiVincenzo is all that different. I think he should probably be lower-owned than Anunoby, but not at like an 18-2 clip. So if that ownership holds on DiVincenzo, I am interested in getting there in tournaments because he's been playing big minutes as a starter as well.
Awesome. On to the Denver and Sacramento game we go. The highest over under on the total right now with 241 last I checked. And it's Nikola Jokic, was amazing on Christmas Day, put up an over 80 fantasy points, continues to be a monster, and I have no issues going to him at all. But I love to see Jamal Murray's minutes continue to go up. He's been exciting to play at the 7K price range. Murray's 7,400 on FanDuel, Jokic 12,400 on FanDuel, 11,400 and 7,100 for Jokic and Murray respectively over there on DraftKings. I like going to both of those guys. No issues whatsoever. I think we'll have enough value to get to them. The other guys, I prefer Michael Porter Jr. would be my third favorite option to go to. I know the minutes are kind of been all over the place. He played a lot in the overtime matchup, more than he has since coming back from injury, where you get that 3-point bonus. He's just a guy whose minutes are volatile. He does have a ceiling, in my opinion. So talking about this Denver team, and it's Jokic and Murray and kind of everyone else you can sprinkle in, don't have really interest going to KCP or Bruce Brown, as Porter Jr. has returned here.
Yeah, Jokic and Murray are the two pulling ownership, and I think it's deserved. Jokic is playing out of his mind. I know I'd mentioned it on shows previously. Like his rates and his numbers were down this year in the games that he played with Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray, and to some extent, I buy into that because Michael Porter Jr. is a higher usage guy than Bruce Brown. Jamal Murray obviously takes on a bigger playmaking role, but also I think it was just Jokic sort of intentionally taking a back seat. We've really seen, one, his playing time ramp up recently, and then two, he's just dominating everything right now for Denver. So I don't want to read too much into expecting his rates to go all the way back to where they were at the beginning of the year. I still think he's going to continue to be very, very good here. He's only $11,400. So the only real issue with Jokic is that he's center only, and there are plenty of solid centers on this slate, but I really like getting them in the spot where I can. Very favorable matchup against Sacramento. Jamal Murray playing huge minutes. He's 7,100. That price tag just hasn't adjusted. He played 38 minutes in regulation against Phoenix, ended up getting to 43 minutes total. We've seen that playing time really ramp up recently. He looks good. So I agree with the ownership coming into both of those guys. I think you mentioned it, but if you're going to get around 30 minutes from Michael Porter Jr. at 5,900 and no ownership, that's pretty interesting too. It's another guy in that price range with, your OG Ananobis and guys where it's just like, oh, this is a useful price to, get to a small forward. Michael Porter Jr. has plenty of upside even in 30 minutes here. It's a really good matchup against Sacramento. Good matchup for Aaron Gordon as well. His price tag has come up a bit, but I think as far as tournament options go, Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. make some sense, but building around Jokic and Jamal Murray certainly makes a lot of sense as well.
Awesome. On to the final final team of the slate. Sacramento on the other side of things. But the big news here is Domantas Sabonis has an avulsion fracture in his right thumb. Sabonis is left-handed. So the situation here is really tricky. I'll be shocked if he plays with the fracture in his right thumb. I know he still uses for basketball purposes. So it's a situation here where we got to wait on the news here for Domantas Sabonis. And I think if Sabonis out, it's just a huge uptick across the board, that being Fox, being Herter, that being Keegan Murray, Harrison Barnes. We'll see the front court rotation change up a little bit. I wouldn't shock me if we get some more Neemias Queta or Rashawn Holmes enter the rotation, or Trey Lyles also in the rotation a bit more. Talk to me about this Sacramento team potentially without no Sabonis.
Yeah, so the Sabonis news is huge because if he's in, then give me Domantas Sabonis in DFS lineups. He's 10,200, playing huge minutes, doubling every game, triple-doubling like half of the games. Massive ceiling for him if he's in. On FanDuel, you get power forward eligibility as well, so it's even easier to prioritize him. If he's out, though, I think you see Alex Len. Kevin Herter mentioned it after practice yesterday that Alex Len had been running with the first team. Now, I don't know how many minutes he plays if he starts. They do have plenty of other centers, whether that's Queta or Holmes, or they throw minutes to Metu. I would expect going up against a Nikola Jokic-led front court that you kind of just get a combination of all of those guys. Try and throw fresh bodies out there in addition to double teaming when you can. Obviously hard to do because he's such a good passer, but I would expect them to take an approach where they're just trying to have fresh bodies on him. But if Alex Len were to start at 3K flat, even if you project like 20 to 22 minutes from him, he's going to look like a decent value. So I think the center position for Sacramento is going to be really important. If Sabonis is out too, you're likely to get increased production from De'Aaron Fox. Sabonis, not a super high usage guy, only around 20% for the season, but also a very good facilitator. You're likely to see more assists from Fox if he's out. Fox 8,400 should give you 34 minutes, give or take. So he's pretty interesting. And then any of the wings, Herter, Barnes, Murray are all fine. But I think whoever is starting at center looks good. And then De'Aaron Fox at 8,400.
Yeah. So keep an eye on that news. Maybe we'll get it by the 1:30 injury report, potentially the 5:30 injury report. So thanks so much for tuning in on the NBA Strategy Show. Check out all those 3-day trials in the link in the description. The NFL Strategy Show is next. Check them out. Thank you so much for joining us. Click that like button, and good luck, everybody.